Hi there, my name is Jen, and thanks so much for joining us this weekend for the last crafter party of the year. The cards I'm going to make today are some really easy cards using Vellum and Acetate, and so we're going to jump right in. I am using mainly the contents of the box. This really cool stencil came in that box, and I'm going to use some Decofoil Transfer Gel Duo. And I'm also going to use the Sunrise Lake foil sheets, transfer sheets, as well as that kind of metallic white paper that came in the box. And the acetate I'm using today, I'm just using it because it's already pre-cut, so it's super convenient. It's pre-cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. But you can use whatever you have on hand, whether that's plastic packaging, a little bit thicker for most of the cards except for the shaker, or another clear film that you have. I'm going to go ahead and tape down the piece of acetate, and then I'm going to place this Hello Winter over the top of it. And I believe this is my first time doing this technique, and so I did actually have to do this twice, and my advice would be don't do what I did. And when I did it the first time, I was really rough with it. I was trying to push the gel into the stencil too much, and it's ended up smearing. So that's why you see I'm kind of like just really gently kind of running the gel across the stencil so that that doesn't happen again, because if you're if you put too much pressure on that, or kind of scrape it too hard, it might do what it did to me, and that is to squeeze that gel out onto the acetate, and it's going to kind of disrupt the letters, so they don't form really well. And so when I do the spreader, I'm holding it at an angle, and I'm again very gently kind of just running that down the stencil to get all of that extra gel off. And then I'm going to go ahead and remove this and set it aside to dry. And you know this is dry when it turns clear. So right now it's a white color, and when it's dry it'll be more of a clear color. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and start on my background piece. And I went ahead and I cut a piece of that metallic white cardstock down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm using some distressed oxides to blend over on that cardstock. The colors I'm using are Faded Jeans, Salty Ocean, and Tumbled Glass. And so I'm just going to go ahead and take my blending brush and start at the top with the darkest color, and then I will go in with the next darkest, which is the Salty Ocean. And when I'm blending inks, I like to blend the color that I'm doing and then go back over it with the previous color. So you'll see I'll go ahead and grab that Faded Jeans again and just try to get a really nice blend of those two colors. This cardstock blends really well with the inks. And then for my lightest color, I'm using Tumbled Glass, and I'm just going to do kind of a fade out on the bottom. I didn't want to cover the entire piece on the bottom. I just wanted it to have a really light fade out on the bottom. And then I will go ahead and grab some water and spritz this to get kind of like a snowflake background, I guess you could say. So I'll go ahead and let that sit there for about 10-15 seconds, and then take my paper towel and blot that water up, which is basically removing that ink, so it will leave little white marks, which looks perfect for the theme of this card. And then my video wasn't recording. I do apologize when I foiled this. And you can see that there's a little bit of foil on different parts of the acetate where I didn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut out the entire sentiment piece and use that instead of the whole panel. And then I colored up this cute little I think it's a rabbit with a balloon. My scan and cut did not recognize the string, so it separated the string from the balloon. So that's why I am kind of adhering these separately. But this foils just like you would foil a piece of paper. All I did was put it in a piece of parchment paper. I put my mini mink on the 3rd setting. I'll put the foil on top and ran it through, and it worked perfectly just like if you were using a piece of paper. I don't think at the 3 setting it gets hot enough to do anything to the acetate. It didn't melt it or warp it or anything like that. So it did end up working out really well. So then I went ahead and I just cut around the edges. So it almost looks like a floating sentiment on the card. I'm going to add some 1/8 inch foam strips to the back of as many of the thicker parts of the letters as I can. And once I have that done, I'll go ahead and kind of do a dry run on the card and see where I want it placed. And then I'm using these crown jewels, and I'm going to place a few of them behind the acetate piece. Hopefully you'll be able to see it in the video. It's probably going to be a little bit hard because the foil kind of has that shine and it kind of disrupts the picture a little bit. But I'm just setting that sentiment down, and then I'm going to add the crown jewels where I want them. And then once I have those all placed, I'll go ahead and remove that acetate piece and start adding all of the glue to glue all the jewels down. And then it's just a matter of removing all the tiny little backings of all the foam and then placing that piece over the jewels so that they're all showing through different areas of the acetate. I added a few more jewels on the bottom, and that's going to finish off this first card. I really love the way the foil looks. I think this would look awesome with white as well. So you can either use a white foil or you can use a solvent ink like StazOn, which I believe it comes in an opaque white, which would look really good against that blue background as well. But to move on to the second card, I'm using a little bit of acetate and vellum, or actually I am using some Duralar film, polyester film for this card. So I'm going to go ahead and do kind of like a split card. The middle is going to be taken out, and that's going to be the acetate portion. And so I started this card out by going ahead and cutting a mat and a piece of pattern paper so that I could determine what portion of the card that needed to be cut. So the bottom portion I'm cutting first. That's going to be matted with a piece of pattern paper. And I went ahead and measured to make sure that I would have enough room on the bottom to add that piece back in. And then I'm going to take the acetate and adhere that, and I am just using my tape runner to adhere that to the inside flap of the card. So this is probably about 2 inches maybe that I left on the top, and then I cut out the middle, and the bottom is probably about 1 inch of cardstock that's going to go back on the bottom. But you're going to be able to see the adhesive through the acetate when you open the card. For now I left it, but you can always take another piece of either pattern cardstock or solid cardstock and adhere that over that acetate piece. It doesn't really bother me, and so I probably going to go ahead and leave it like that for now. And then I'm taking that bottom piece that I cut off first, and I'm adhering that back to the bottom of the card onto the acetate. So you have kind of like a little window right in the middle. And then I will go ahead and mat my pattern paper onto my white cardstock, and those will be adhered to the top and the bottom of the card. Don't you love the pattern paper in this box? It is so cute. There's one, it's kind of awesome because there's one set that is super cute, and then you have another set that's more elegant, I guess you could say, with the blues and the polar bears and the roses. Just really beautiful, beautiful paper. And so once I have the pattern paper adhered to my card, I was going to leave the inside blank, but I thought it was kind of plain. And so what I ended up doing was taking another piece of that pattern paper and adhering it to the inside. But by doing that, I'm taking away pretty much the ability to write a sentiment inside. And I guess that could be done either on the back of the card, or I could add more cardstock on the front that is solid, but I didn't want to do that. And so once I have got my pattern paper adhered to the inside of the card, I went ahead and I grabbed a die from my stash, and it's just a little speech bubble die, and it's fairly small, but it's still enough room to write a sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that, and that can be where I add the maybe who it's from, and then maybe even later I will add like a Merry Christmas sentiment to go under the window portion, like a die cut or something like that. But for now I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is, and I am just adding some double-sided adhesive to adhere the vellum. And because the vellum is on, or this is the Duralar, but it's similar to vellum, because it is on a pattern background, it makes it very hard to see that adhesive, so it kind of covers that up a little bit. And then for the top of the tree where you can see that little piece of adhesive, I just went ahead and I took one of the fibers that came in the box. It's got kind of like little rabbit tails almost, the little like cotton balls. I went ahead and adhered that to the very top of the tree. And that's going to finish off this second card. As you can see, it still stands up really nicely, so you can put it on display still, even though it's got that acetate piece in the middle. And for this next card, I am taking a piece of kind of craft cardstock. I really love the cappuccino cardstock from Maker Forte, but unfortunately I don't have any more of it, and so I'm just grabbing some craft cardstock from my stash. I am also using a piece of that metallic white paper. This is another piece of a vellum-like paper. It is the Duralar polyester film. I have cut that to 4.5 by 6.5 because I'm going to fold it over. And then I'm going to use one of these cute little kind of word, I guess, definition from these sheets of all of those words. And I'm using a little bit of kind of everything from the box. I'm going to start out by stamping up the wreath in some white pigment ink, and this is the Maker Forte pigment ink called Snow Flurries. And I love the way that white looks on craft. It's just a really beautiful kind of timeless look, I think. And then to cut the wreath out, I went ahead and I found a circle die in my stash that fit the closest to that wreath, to the inside, and I used that to cut the middle out. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut the outside of the wreath with my scissors. So I'm just doing a little bit of fussy cutting. And then you'll see, I'll go ahead and take the scissors, and because I have that circle cut out and the outside cut out, it makes it really easy to get the scissors on the inside of the circle, so that you can kind of make that more of a shaped form rather than just like that standard just perfect circle, so it looks more like a wreath, or like you would have something that die cut that out. And then I'm taking a little bit of Distress ink in Vintage Photo and a finger dauber and adding a little bit of a detail to the wreath. And then because I measured the vellum piece to 6.5, that's going to actually fold over the back of the card, and so I want to score it so that only 5.5 inches it covers the top of the card, which is your standard card size. And so I went ahead and scored that and am folding that over, and that's going to make it really easy to go ahead and adhere that to the back of the card. And then to add a little bit of a snow splatter effect, I'm using this Tim Holtz stencil along with some Nuvo white gloss drops. And I'm just going to kind of position that where I want it on my card. I just wanted a few little details for texture. I really love the gloss of these Nuvo drops. And so I'm just going to take my little craft knife and spread the Nuvo drops through the stencil. And it gives a really nice kind of spattering of like a snow almost. And this took a bit to dry. I left it for a few hours just to make sure it was completely dry, but I added that to several places around the vellum. As you can see on the inside, I have my card base, so that's just going to fold over the card base. And then for the little tag, I chose the one that says joy, and I got my A Dile II out, which is always a learning experience every time I have to go look on YouTube and find out how to use this thing because I don't have the instructions and I just don't know why it seems so complicated. But I wanted to add this little eyelet to the tag and then put some string through it. I really love using eyelets. I think it gives a really pretty effect on different items, and I hardly ever use them, which is why you have to relearn this tool every time. So I went ahead and I found the settings online. I don't think I pressed hard enough because it didn't cut the paper out all the way, so I'm just going to take my tool and kind of grab that paper and move it out. But at least I didn't break anything or flatten it out too much. And so I'm going to put a little bit of brown twine through the hole. And so I grabbed some from my stash. And I'm going to add one of these little snowflake kind of charms that came in the box. I think these items match up so perfectly, and so I wanted something that had a little bit of hang to it, and this tiny little snowflake right here has kind of like a bar on it, so I really wanted it to swing, and so that is the one that I picked out from the set of all these beautiful snowflake charms. And those Nuvo drops are still wet, and so I just went ahead and I took the twine and put it through the kind of loophole in the charm, as well as threaded that twine through the eyelet piece with the tag. And then I'm going to go ahead and set that aside for a bit and wait for my panel to dry. But I really love the way that this looks with the little charm hanging off of the tag. I just think it's just kind of a, I don't know why it makes me think of like a rustic look, but I really love the tag. And there's a whole bunch of them in the set, so they can be used to hang on gift tags or made to add to cards. So you get a ton of them, so you'll have a lot of different uses for them. So I went ahead and I took my hand hole punch and punched it through. So I punched it through all of the layers. So I've got the card base and the vellum there. And then I went ahead and I created a banner tag with the Merry Christmas sentiment from, I believe it is the sentiment that came with the wreaths. And I am going to adhere that whole piece. I've adhered it together, and the entire piece is going to be adhered underneath the vellum. I tried it on top of the vellum, and I didn't really care for it like that. So I thought it looked a little bit better, kind of muted underneath the vellum piece. And so I will go ahead and adhere that on the inside and then trim off that piece that is hanging over the side. And then I mess around with the tag for a little bit before I decide how exactly I want to loop that through the hole punch. And I finally just ended up tying a knot at the top several times to keep that secure. And then I wanted the extra twine to still be there, so I didn't trim that off, and it pretty much just hangs on the front of the card. I love that look for some reason, and then I could still write a sentiment or even stamp another sentiment on the inside and send this off in the mail. For my next card, of course, it's a shaker card. I can't do acetate without a shaker. without making a shaker. This would work with either Vellum or Acetate. I think Vellum gives a really pretty muted look, and the Acetate is, of course, like a window. You can see right through it. So these are the items I'm going to use. I based my color scheme on the mix that I'm going to be using. It's kind of like a Scottish dog mix, I think is what it's called. But I'm going to go ahead, and I've already created my frame, and I am using the roller skates cardstock from Maker Forte for my frame, and so I just had set that down to make sure that all my little kitty cats fit into the window. And so I added 4 of the cats, and you'll see that this stamp set matches up with the sentiment stamp set. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the cats, and then I'm going to add the little speech bubbles that are from that second set. And so I am inking this up in some color Hive black ink, which is alcohol marker friendly, and I'm going to be coloring these up with some alcohol markers. And so I went ahead and I placed all the little speech bubbles. So it says, "We wish you a merry," and then I'm going to put the other portion on the inside. So I went ahead and I colored up all my cute little kitties to match the shaker mix. And then I am going to add my acetate window, which I have to trim down just a little bit to fit because this frame is smaller than the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card base. And then I'm taking my red double-sided adhesive because it's a really strong adhesive, and I'm just going to go around that entire square window with that. And then I will go ahead and peel off one side of the frame, and I'm going to add my adhesive, and then I will peel off the remaining pieces. This helps me to just keep it nice and even and not kind of crooked or wonky, and it gets it nice and flat. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove the rest of the backings for those pieces, and then that acetate's going to stick really nicely down on my window. And then I'm adding the foam, and this isn't real thick foam. They are 1/8 inch wide, but they're not really tall. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my frame. And I'm always so stingy with my shaker mixes. I never want to use too much. And so I had this little bit. I honestly should have kept it. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to be stingy on this card. I'm going to add a whole bunch of the shaker mix. So I added this little bit. And like I said, this would have been the perfect amount. And then I'm like, oh, let's not be stingy, Jen. And so I went ahead and I added a whole bunch more, which was a mistake. And you'll see why. I was so upset that I couldn't fix this. But I went ahead and I placed the shaker window over that, and then you'll see that because the foam isn't really high and there are some fairly chunky pieces in the shaker mix, it doesn't move around that great, and then stuff gets stuck over my cute little kitties. And so I was a little upset that I misjudged that, but I still think it's a cute card, and if you're shaking it, it eventually will shake off. But I went ahead on the inside, I used that little wiener dog stamp, and then there is the other sentiment bubble. So the outside says, "We wish you a merry," and then when you open up the card, it says Christmas, and it has that cute little wiener dog. And then I'm using some of the threads from the box, and I just did a double bow, and then I added one of those clay pieces from the shaker mix to the center of the bow using a little bit of glue. But if you haven't already created some cards using these stamp sets, this one is so adorable. So many cute little characters, and just perfect for the holidays. That's going to finish off my last card. I have a few tags that I made. I don't show the process because they're super simple, but I'm going to go ahead and show you the tags and then run through the cards one more time. And so the tags I made, I just did 3 layers, a layer of cardstock, a layer of pattern paper, and then this is actually vellum that I'm using on these. And I did do eyelets on these. I just cut this in my paper trimmer and then used a corner rounder to round off the corners and added one of the bows from the ribbon from the box. And then on this one, I did kind of a rabbit-eared corners, just cutting with the scissors. And again, it has a piece of cardstock, of pattern paper, and then the vellum. And then for this one, I added a little trim from my stash of the pearls because I thought it looked really nice with that beautiful floral paper. And while I'm going through the last look at these cards, I just wanted to say a big thank you and a shout out to Alex and Lisa and everybody involved in making this event happen. I know it wasn't easy this time with everything that's going on. I also wanted to give a huge shout out to everybody that is participating for your patience and your dedication to Maker Forte and the Crafter Party. It's just a really great community to be a part of, and everybody just is so awesome. And so I love being a part of it and participating in the Crafter Party events. And this was no exception today. I really love this box. They are always fabulous. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe got some new ideas for some Christmas cards or other occasion cards that you can also create. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Crafter Party weekend. As always, there is a lot to be inspired by from all of the teachers, and so I wish you well, and thanks so much for being a part of it with me today.